great. This is a great turnout. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. I will just point out that while this is not a city consultation or a city session, it's something that I'm hosting from my office as a city councilor. I'm really pleased to see that Chair Glenn Gower is here to listen in. He and I have been talking about some of the data collection and data dissemination that has been underway, and we're both quite excited about it, both nerds at heart. So I will just say, we'll launch right in, but my name is Jeff Leeper. I am the city councilor for Kitchissippi Ward. I have served on the Transit Commission for each of the 3 terms that I've been a city councilor. It is near and dear to my heart. A lot of the city planning that we are doing in terms of achieving the vision of our new official plan absolutely depends on getting public transit right. We are going to grow over the course of the next 25 years by 400,000, 500,000 people. That's the equivalent of adding a city the size of Halifax to our population. And we can't do that if everyone is trying to get around the city by private automobile. We need public transit to work. We need it to be a first choice for people in order to achieve the overall vision of our official plan, which breaks the mold of how we've been planning cities since the end of the war. So this evening, Ajay and Shane are with me to talk about some of the quantitative tools that they've developed to try to track where we are. Can't sugarcoat it. Both, especially our bus system right now is severely challenged, and I appreciate the tools that Ajay has put together with his colleagues to track the performance of the bus, and we'll talk about what sort of insights can be gleaned. But the train, as is headline news as well, is also very challenged right now with the most recent spalling issue that has been added to the fretting issue. I never knew as a city councilor I was going to have to get as deep into the components of a axle bearing assembly as city councilors have been forced to do. So, you know what? Let me just first off ask the folks on the call to introduce themselves, and then we'll kick it over to Shane. Shane, who are you?
Hi everyone, I'm Shane Seguin. I am the creator and the editor-in-chief of Railfans Canada, and we're a online platform. We have a website, we have a YouTube channel where we showcase the different public transit rail systems in Canada, mostly big focus on Ottawa's O-Train, Montreal's Metro and RAM, Via Rail, talking about Alto and things beyond that.
Thanks, Shane. And Ajay, who are you?
I'm Ajay. I'm from Better Transit Ottawa. We're a group of transit fans fighting for a useful, reliable, and sustainable transit network. And we're the type of people who all woke up at 6 a.m. last January to go ride Line 2. I mean, our group was only started very recently. A lot of us met there. We love the system. We want it to work. We want everything to work. And, you know, we're here to try to make that happen.
That was a very cold morning, and you're here with Yukara. Yukara,
Yukira, I am an organizer slash a lot of different positions over at Better Transit Ottawa.
thank you, and you're with Griffin as well.
Hi, yes, I am one of the co-founders of Bear Transit Ottawa alongside Ajay. Hopefully my mic is working this time.
We hear you. You sound great. Thank you.
Awesome.
And I'm here with Ben. Ben, who are you?
I work for Jeff on transit and transportation infrastructure, all that kind of capital construction and public money file. And I'm here tonight to help facilitate this webinar.
Amazing. So I'm going to throw it over to Shane, and then we'll hear from Ajay. And then I've asked each of them to sort of keep it to, if they can, 10 minutes showing what they're doing. And then hopefully we can jump into a Q&A, which we will accomplish by writing your questions into the Q&A dialog box. Shane, all yours.
So, hey everybody, thanks for joining tonight, and thank you, Councillor Leeper, for hosting us. So just a little bit about Railfans Canada. So it started back in 2019, originally as O-Train fans. And then, of course, the pandemic happened and the original intent was to provide all sorts of information about the system, whether it be the trains, the stations, the lines. We've done a lot of behind the scenes features going to station sites that are under construction that are not publicly accessible. We've talked to the general manager. We've talked to the mayor in the past. Just showcasing the whole system, how it works, educating people on how the different technical aspects work. So I definitely invite you to check out our website, railfans.ca, and our YouTube channel, which has a lot of content, especially about the stage 2 progress, the east and the west. We do almost monthly updates showing the current progress and discussing about that. So very passionate about the O train. And just to wrap that up very briefly, it started as O train fans. It changed to being from 2018, it changed in 2020 to Rail Fans Canada because we wanted to branch out to other systems as well. So tonight, what I'm going to show you is I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to show you what we built. Whoops, let's get rid of that. So what I've created recently, I'm sure you all know about the current issues that Line 1 is experiencing right now, which has pretty much sidelined 3/4 of the light rail vehicle fleet. This is something that I had done back when the line first opened in 2019. It was more of a fun thing to try where people could write in and submit the trains that they would see on the line so that we could keep track of. I think with stage 1 there was 32 trains or 36 trains originally, and it's going to be going up to 72 in total with stage 2. So it was for people to submit, oh, I saw this train in service, or saw that train at this station, or I rode on that train. And the idea was we could see which trains were active, which trains hadn't been seen in a while. It was more just a fun thing at the time. Over time, as the trains became part of the fleet and were active, we kind of took that down because it didn't make too much sense at the time. Now that we're seeing issues and 3/4 of the fleet being sidelined, I figured it was time to bring it back, sort of revamp it with some additional little features, and I'm pretty much tweaking it every single day, trying to sort of refine how some of the data is being collected. And with this, what we can determine is how many trains are operating each day, how many trains operated in the AM peak period and in the PM peak period. AM peak is considered as 6 to 9 a.m. and the PM peak is 3 to 6 p.m. People can submit trains. So if they're on the train, or if they're at a station and they're watching trains go by, or if your first and last name is Jeff Leeper and you like watching trains and counting them on the fly, you can submit your trains here. So you can select the train number that you're riding. If there's a second coupled train, currently there aren't because we have a limited number of trains available. So you can pick the train, you can pick the station, change this to be optional. So if you had done this in the past, it's now optional. You don't have to specify the location, you don't have to specify the direction. And if you didn't get around to submitting it at the time of, you can backdate it so that it comes back in chronologically. So from this information, we can see up here the train numbers that were operating today. So today we captured out of 51 submissions, it's all crowdsourced. So either myself or other people who are riding the trains submit their trains to our system here. We can see the train numbers that were operating, 16 today, 15 in the morning peak, 15 in the afternoon peak. You can sort of see like some recent reports that came in. And then this right here is the part that really tells the full picture. So right now, in the last 7 days, we've only seen 18 trains in service. In the last 14, there was 27, and beyond that, it doesn't really count because we just started this on the 21st. So what we can tell from this is that it's essentially the same 18 trains that have been left in service since pretty much 2 weeks ago on Wednesday, that are seeing passenger service day in, day out. There hasn't been any new trains that have been restored to service. Luckily, these trains haven't really gone out of service, but it's very risky as it stands right now, right? You have 18 trains that are available. Generally, we're seeing 15 to 16 trains in the peak period. I think earlier last week we were actually seeing 16 in the morning and 16 at night. Now it seems to have settled to about 15. But as you can imagine, with a limited number of trains offering very little capacity, one train has a capacity of about 300 people. When you have two coupled trains together, it makes 600 people. So working with singles at 300 people, you can imagine why the platforms are often crowded as they are, and we're seeing in the pictures. So the concern with this is that, there's obviously a process that Alstom, that RTG, RTM have to go through to investigate this latest issue and to replace the cartridge bearing assemblies on these trains to be able to bring more trains back into service. So my concern really is tracking how many trains we're seeing if new trains come back into service or if we start losing trains. So from here we can see when the last time was that we spotted a train. So obviously 11:20 here, that got taken off the day that the news first broke, which is almost 2 weeks now. Some other trains here, they've been in service pretty much every single day. You can see like the trains are reported today if there was coupled trains. If you click one of the train numbers, you can see like a recent history of the last 20 reports of that train. So you can see how often has it come out, how many days has it come out, has it been seen? Pretty much the picture for all the trains that are in service right now is pretty much identical because there's so limited number. They're almost all seeing the light of day every single day. So this is something that we put together really just to shed a light and to keep tabs on what's going on. Now the next hopeful progression from this would be to sort of automate this. So I'll show you one last thing here. So again, if you're familiar with our platform, you know that you may know that we have this is not sponsored by Base 44 or anything, but we have two live stream cameras. We have a camera set up at Bayview, and we have a camera set up at Searville Station. So from here, we can actually see the trains going by all day long. And I'm actually using this when I'm not able to get out to the line. I'm trying to use it as well to help supplement the reports, the crowdsourcing that we're getting. I zoom in, I see the train number as it goes by. The hope is that I'll be able to automate this at some point, that there'll be like some optical character recognition to pick up the train numbers, to populate the system automatically, and then we'd be able to see even more interesting insights like the headways between trains. Pretty much the complete picture of what's going on. As it stands right now, the camera that we're using doesn't have quite enough zoom to be able to do that accurately in an automated sense, but we're looking into switching that out so that would be possible. But that's the next iteration, hopefully in the near future, of what we would like to do with this. And that's pretty much it on my side. I guess I'll turn it back over to Jeff and to AJ to talk about his platform and data collection.
Yeah, Shane, thank you very much. We'll get into some discussion and questions after Ajay's had a chance to present. What is Better Transit Ottawa up to, Ajay?
Sure. So I'm sorry, I might be more like 15 minutes. Okay. So so as I said, we're a group of transit fans fighting for a useful, reliable, and sustainable transit network, but with a special focus on operational problems. Because we have knowledge from some current and former bus and rail operators, from riders' experiences and real-world data to try to figure out what's actually going on. And so one particular issue we've been focusing on is bus reliability, which has been steadily getting worse over the past several years. While Council continually promises us that a resolution is just around the corner. And one of the biggest reasons for that is simply the lack of working buses. So this is caused by numerous factors, such as prematurely scrapping too many buses after line 1 opened, like this hybrid bus here, which was scrapped, delaying too long before making new bus orders, and then when finally buying buses, we chose to buy only battery electric buses, which unfortunately have had some supply chain issues, and they're actually 2 years behind schedule. But this isn't really unexpected, but the problem is by the time they were actually bought, there wasn't any time to spare. And the last thing is an unhealthy workplace for mechanics, which has been causing many mechanics to quickly leave. And now there's not enough mechanics to fix the old buses that we do still have, and we have a lot of old buses. Today, over half of our bus fleet is past its expected useful life, and our last articulated bus was supposed to have been decommissioned already. And last week, 279 aging articulated buses were used on the road. And while these issues are going on, OC Transpo keeps publishing statistics that make everything look fine, and it's been hard for us to convince City Council of the severity of this issue. So for example, this is the new transparency that's been published this month called the Bus Service Delivery Action Plan, and we can see they're still showing numbers like 95% service delivery, which doesn't really feel like it represents how people actually feel when they're experiencing the system. And to try to help this problem, we decided to create several dashboards to try to demonstrate the true severity of the crisis, show what parts of the system are being affected the most, and look for areas where interim solutions could improve things. We're using a system called GTFS, which is the same data OC Transpo provides to all the transit apps to show where the GPS locations of buses are, but you could do a lot more than just that with that data. And so we have several different dashboards I'm going to go over. To start, this is the bus availability dashboard. On here, we can see for a particular day how the bus availability has been. So all my data I'm using last Wednesday. That's because it wasn't a snowy day and all the school routes were running. There weren't any PA days or exams. So last Wednesday, we can see this is a graph over the whole day. And let's start with the green line. So the green line shows us the number of scheduled trips at a particular point in time. So we can see how there are a lot of scheduled trips during the morning peak and a lot of scheduled trips during the afternoon peak. And this is just to accommodate more riders. But then we can look at the blue line, the dark blue line. This is the buses that are actively on a route. And we can see during off-peak, there are more buses actively on a route than scheduled. But during on-peak, there's less. And why is that? That's because there's always going to have to be slightly more buses on routes than there are scheduled because some routes are going to be running late. So you'll have some late buses running and some newly scheduled buses running. And to account for that, we have this yellow line here, which is the number of buses that are delayed but are still running. So that means they were supposed to have ended, but they're still running because they might be 20 minutes late due to traffic. And what this really shows, though, is you can see during peak time, we can't even get to that point. We're not even having enough buses to get to the number of scheduled trips. So then we can look at this light blue line. This is our estimated number of buses that actually needed to get full service. The way we calculate this is we take the number of scheduled trips and we add in the number of delayed trips. So this would be the number of buses that you need to be able to not cause further cascading delays. And so we can see the shaded area shows us where the bus shortage truly is. The bus shortage is mainly around the peak periods of time. And we can also look at how much it is. We're seeing here, for example, maximum bus deficit. That's the amount of buses that we need being 80 buses. We can actually compare this to a weekend where we don't necessarily have this bus shortage. First of all, you don't see the peaks because we don't have the same peak service. We just kind of have slowly ramping up service and slowly unramping service. And you can see how most of the time that dark blue line is above the green line, which means we have more buses than we're scheduling. So it's a healthy environment. So you can kind of compare the two situations. But then we can look at back to the bus delivery action plan released this month, and we can see our electric bus procurement. So by the end of this quarter, we're supposed to get 69 buses, which is going to be very nice. But we had a max deficit of 80 buses today or on Wednesday. So we're not even necessarily going to cover that. And then if you account for the fact that there's probably still going to be delays in this schedule, and for the fact that we have articulated buses, 279 of them, that are supposed to already be decommissioned. Unfortunately, we're still looking at a very slow bus procurement. And I think even the total bus procurement is just not going to be enough to be able to account for all standards, like for our service standards we want. So this really shows us, this will also allow us to see how the bus deficit is changing over time, to see if these new bus deliveries are actually achieving what they want to do. The next page is the cancellation page. On this page, we can see a list of canceled trips per route. So on here, we're sorting by cancellation percentage and looking at different routes that have different cancellation percentages. So we can see the Route 15 had 22% of its trips on Wednesday canceled, and this one 22% as well. And the other thing that's interesting is each of these lines in this table is one trip that was canceled. And we can actually look at this column here called the service gap, and we can see that because of this cancellation here, there's now a 51-minute service gap. And so I think this really communicates how one cancellation or one or two cancellations can cause what it can cause as a real experience for a rider. So a rider is now going to have to wait 51 minutes, where previously they were meant to wait only 15 minutes. And I think this is really important to demonstrate that fact. The other thing that's interesting to look at is just the peak periods. So we can look at the cancellation percentages just during the afternoon peak. And we can see that routes like the 44 and the 13 are having 40% of their trips canceled, leading to service gaps. So time people now have to wait up to 67 minutes. This is pretty bad and just shows how severe our problem is compared to the OC Transwa's statistic of 95% delivery. Next, this is the route page. So here, if you just want to see how a route is doing, you can go on this page, choose a route, choose a day, and you can look throughout the day how the route's doing. So each of these lines is one trip on the route. On the left is one direction to Carleton, and on the right is the direction to Saint Laurent. And we can see which trips are canceled, but also which trips are delayed, because we have the scheduled start time, the actual start time, and then in brackets here is our delay. So we can see how this trip started 11 minutes late, and if it's more than 10 minutes late, it shows as yellow. If it's more than 15 minutes, it shows as red. So you can really get a quick glance at how a route is performing. But then the most interesting part, I think, of our tools is figuring out why a route is delayed or why a route is canceled. And the way we do that is using our other tool called the Block Explorer. So you might see here this block ID and not know what this means. But if you click on it, it brings you to the Block Explorer. So if we go to the 703 block, we'll see this. And to understand this, you have to understand what a block is. So a block basically is how a bus is scheduled, not a bus route, but a physical bus. So a physical bus will be taken out of the garage and do the 7 Carleton starting at 6 a.m., and then the 7 Saint Laurent, then the 7 Carleton, and then might go back to the garage or might do another block. But unfortunately, when this block came up for schedule, there was no bus available for it. So the entire block got canceled. And we can actually see as well that it's been canceled for the last 3 days consecutively. So this can show you if one of your trips you're taking is actually a semi-permanent cancellation or if it's just a happenstance cancellation, because some of these blocks are repetitively canceled. And this is a good way to analyze that. And if we look at what a normal block looks like, we can kind of understand how these work. So this is block 25-04, and it's just a bunch of trips starting at 6:23. So we have the scheduled start, the actual start, and just like on the other page, we can see the delay in the brackets. And here we can kind of see the cascading delay effect because there's not enough recovery time for a delay. So we can see how this route ended 17 minutes late, which caused this next route to start 14 minutes late. And then it caused it to end 14 minutes late again. And sometimes there's enough recovery time to fix this, sometimes there isn't. And sometimes if there's consistently cascading delays, it causes a cancellation. So in here we have a cancellation, and that's just to get the bus back to schedule. And so this is an example of a cancellation, not because there's necessarily no bus, but because there isn't, because just to get the bus back on schedule. However, sometimes if there are extra buses available, they would have been able to take over, which I'll explain later. So here's another example of a cancellation method. So this is where the Block Explorer gets kind of interesting because it actually shows like a graph. So you have this one block, 41-02, and you have this other block here, 901-714, and you can actually see this arrow. So this arrow is showing that this bus did all of these trips and then went over and started doing this other block. And the reason why it did is because it has a 698, which is a school route, which are prioritized. And then after the school route was over, it came back and continued the trip. But in its wake, you now have a bunch of cancellations. So this is kind of an example of how having routes like school routes, which are priority trips, can cause cancellations throughout the network. And sometimes part of these cancellations can be covered by extra buses, as I was describing earlier. So here's an example of one of those. So this bus 6401 just does a bunch of any trip it can handle, it seems. And so it came over and was able to cover 2 of the trips. And you can kind of see that in this diagram. And here's another interesting one. This is an example of 2131, which is an electric bus. So we can see an electric bus go through and complete one block, which took a decent amount of time, and finish it at about 12 p.m., and then start another block at 1800. And so here we can kind of see how the charging pattern of an electric bus might differ compared to another bus, because this bus probably went back to the garage, charged up, and then went back out. And this is not something we have right now, but it's something we're looking into in the future, is trying to figure out how is the service hour delivery per bus type. How are we doing there? That's not something we're doing now, but I think it's interesting to look into. And then just for fun to show how crazy these diagrams are going, I'm just going to show some crazy ones. Because the thing is, with our bus shortage, we kind of have this whole musical chairs going on, where you have all these blocks, but you don't have enough buses to fill them. So you have to have a lot of buses continuing to do a different block right after it finishes a block. And so you end up with these scenarios where a bus does one trip from a block, then goes to another block. But it's pretty interesting to see how it all goes out. And I think the transit control is doing a pretty good job with what they have here. So that's the Block Explorer. The last thing is we have this on-time performance tracker, which is made by another member called Eric. And he made this on-time performance tracker to try to, so for the trips that aren't canceled, we want to determine how are they actually doing. And OC Transpo has started doing this new threshold called regularity instead of on time for frequent routes. But we still wanted to know the on-time performance. So we've started calculating that. You could choose a start date, end date, and just look at the overall on-time performance at specific times a day or for specific routes. And I think this will be very helpful for people to figure out which routes are the most canceled and might need extra transit priority or extra bus lanes. And that's about it for our tools. We're actively working on these tools, and we're looking forward to hearing new ideas on how to use this data and make our transit system better. Thanks.
Amazing. Oh, good. And I'm sorry, I'm just seeing the Q&A queue, and it looks like there's a lot of stuff in that Q&A queue, and I'll turn it over to Ben in a second. Without looking in there, though, I do want to make sure that we just address, how are you hoping that the tools that you have made available are going to be used, whether by OC Transpo, whether by politicians, or whether by the residents of Ottawa? Shane?
Well, I think what I would say, and it's going to apply to AJ's tool as well, is that, and I think this comes back to the point of the transit committee meetings, right? They're very few and in between. They used to be a lot more frequent. So from one meeting to the next, there can often be like a 2, sometimes 3 month gap. so you don't know what the official position is, right? So at least with mine, you get some sense of, and in between the memos as well, you get some sense of how many trains are actually out there and are they making progress into restoring the service. And I think the tool for the buses as well is very important because, like what was being explained in the last 15 minutes there, you don't know what the situation is between, like the regular person is not really going to understand what's happening without seeing visualizations like that, right? Without seeing how you're, and it's super elaborate. Like I'm really impressed with what's been put together there. It's really an impressive tool. But you need to know what's going on to be able to come to transit committee as a delegate and be able to speak on these things, right? Having these quantifiable numbers really gives you a lot of ammunition and a lot of factual backing to the points that you're going to make. I it's obviously very frustrating, whether it's to see the trains missing in action or to see the buses missing in action. Not everything is controllable with the situation that the city is in with, a limited budget and human resource limitations as far as personnel. But this really sheds a bright eye on what's really happening behind the scenes that's not
Yeah.
entirely apparent. And if you give like a percentage, like 95% of the trips are being delivered, well, I mean, there's clearly a bigger impact than what that would lead anyone to believe.
Yeah. Ajay, and then we'll turn it over to Ben. Oh, and I did have one other question for you. I'm sorry. But yeah, go ahead, Ajay. How are you hoping that the various different stakeholders in this discussion will use the tools that you've made and your colleagues?
I would be happy to take that.
Thank you.
Go for it.
So obviously a big thing about the bus reliability issues that we're seeing today is, I mean, as Ajay said, it's a lot of musical chairs. And we're obviously seeing some routes being prioritized more than others. We've seen a big shift in OC Transpo's. We've seen a lot more school routes going out to high schools and stuff, which obviously when those routes are prioritized because they have to run, otherwise students aren't getting to school. That is taking away from our general fleet. That is also coming from an atmosphere of the last 2 or 3 years where there was a major shortage of school bus drivers, like yellow bus drivers. But having this kind of data will allow us to have. It'll allow us to put, I mean, I don't want to say pressure, but the answer is pressure. It'll allow us to put pressure on council using our own real data as opposed to the data that is a little handpicked, massaged by OC Transpo. I'll hand it over to Alex now.
Yeah, for sure. I think a big part about what you asked beforehand is what OC Transpo should do with it. And I think the reality is that OC Transpo has pretty much all of this data themselves. We are getting the data from the same place they're getting it, and it's themselves. I think it's helpful for us to put it in a way that the public can understand and not in a way that you need to dig through freedom of information requests for. There's been a couple of reports now. I think they did one for Route 11 where they did a really big, deep, in-depth dive into what's going wrong with that route, and they submitted to each ward Route 11 is in. They submitted a whole bunch of data, but all that data isn't public. It was hidden behind a Freedom of Info request. And so having this stuff that's easily digestible by the public is super helpful because it allows people to see the actual scale of what is going on, and it's something that counselors need to see too, because a lot of what council has a problem with is that they actually need to like push to get this data, and they don't know what to ask for. And so having this in a format where even counselors can see it really easily is super helpful to push for better service and improving service and what needs to be done to improve service.
Yep. So forgive my ignorance, but I believe that the transit app is using the GTFS data, and then there's would be presumably a proprietary algorithm that they're using in order to do predicted arrival times. There's another service called Transea, which seems very sophisticated, that I think is taking its data from GTFS as well. There seems to be even more sort of granular segment GPS data that's available
Yeah.
that I'm assuming at some point you would look at incorporating. Again, understanding you guys are volunteers, so
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think that was the
go ahead.
yeah, that was kind of like the inspiration as to why IJ like made this, is that Transy is really awesome, and it's pretty hard to decipher as someone who doesn't have a lot of technical know-how. It's pretty dense, like information dense. So we wanted to bring this down to a point where it's super user friendly to poke at on a desktop or on your phone or whatever. So GPS data would certainly be cool. It's pretty hard once you get into the more granular data kind of stuff.
okay. No, this is fantastic. I am going to turn it over to Ben to start working through some of the questions. And Ben, rather than sort of in order, I wonder if you could pick out sort of, maybe we can go from high level to really super in the weeds questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look through here.
And while he's doing that, Ben,
And
we're not recording, eh?
we are.
We are. Oh, good. Okay. Phew.
We've been recording. Yep. So I think there's some kind of a high level question for you, Jeff, would be is and potentially for everyone to weigh in on is why isn't OC Transpo publishing this data themselves, given that they are tracking that data internally, and I think that's a good jumping off point to start with.
Yeah, so I'm going to treat that as a rhetorical question. I'm a city councilor. I don't work for OC Transpo, and I can't tell OC Transpo what to do. But of late, I have to tell you, I've probably sent about 5 notes to OC Transpo asking about various customer complaints that I've received and pointing to the data that has been available on Better Transit Ottawa with their site. In order to sort of dig at the answers that they're giving me. So I don't know why it's not made available. I know like Shane and Ajay, you have relationships with OC Transpo staff and you have good relationships. I don't know if you sort of ever explored what challenges they may face in terms of providing more transparent data, or whether your conversations have ever gone down that path.
Well, I could start on that. Speaking from the train perspective, the train positions and the timing and all that kind of information that we already see with the buses is still an outstanding deliverable from RTG to OC Transpo. So right now, there is no way to know where a train is, how long it's going to be. If you look at the transit app, it's just based on the schedule. There's no real-time updates. So the buses actually have that to their advantage. The trains do not. And in fact, if we put it in the bleakest possible picture, that information to the public is only available on the platform information displays. That is the only spot you will see it. It's not available anywhere else. So that's obviously a big limitation, right? Especially when we have 10-minute service. There's many times where I've run out from my office downtown, on near Parliament Station, run down, see the one flashing on the display board, meaning that the train is either arriving or about to depart. I don't hear any noise because it's around lunchtime, so the traffic flow on the train is pretty low. Get down to the platform, the door just closed, and off it goes. 10 minutes for the next one. I have no idea what's going to happen until you get down there. So that's obviously a big limitation. And that definitely plays into what I'm trying to do. Obviously, my system is 100% crowdsourced because there's no other source of the information. It's completely manual observation. There's no feed, there's no data feed, there's no electronic way of gathering that. So it's pretty much the goodness of people sharing their observations or me capturing it on the camera and hopefully at some point being able to automate it. but that's definitely something hopefully does become available at some point. And I have asked OC Transpo numerous times. Almost every time I see them, I ask them, is this information going to be available? Because we have an interactive map, it would be great to see the little trains going back and forth on it. They said it's still an outstanding deliverable from the original stage one project. And they've always explained to me, we have bigger fish to fry with RTG and other issues that we would rather them focus on than something like this, even though it's important.
Ajay, I don't know if you have any insight
Yeah.
into the challenges of making this information public.
I mean, one thing to clarify, I wouldn't say we have like a good relationship with OC Transpo where you can get data or anything. Our data is from public data, Freedom of Information Act requests, which isn't necessarily something people like, and just talking to some of the frontline employees. We don't know any management or anything like that.
Okay.
But I think the hard thing with my opinion on this kind of thing is, I don't know how true it is, but my opinion is, OC Transpo is a city department. So all of the heads there, it's kind of their job is, to defend the city as an institution. So I don't think they're necessarily going to feel too comfortable putting data that's too negative. So I think that's kind of partially how I see us as a group is we're able to say some of the things that the OC Transpo management might be too scared to say. I know the current OC Transpo management seems to be a lot more transparent now than previously, but it's still hard. Like when you watched a budget commission like last year at the budget committee, and the GM of OC Transpo keeps saying we don't need any more money, everything's fine. I don't think that's necessarily fully honest, right? There's some politics going on there. So that's kind of my theory on it, at least.
Okay. Certainly a lot of what the city puts out in terms of communications are more spin than I would like. And maybe in the next term of council, we can take a look at an overall approach by the city that is more committed to transparency and tough conversations with residents. But I also have a fairly generous belief that there are several data sets that are created by the city that are done for purely practical operational reasons and we have a requirement, or not we, the city has a requirement when it's putting information out to make sure that it is accessible and that it is bilingual and a lot of those sort of things. I'm thinking about, for example, the snow clearing worksheets that are finally how the city started to satisfy some of the demand by city councilors who wanted to know, like, what street is getting removal next, because I'm getting yelled at by residents who want to know when snowbanks are going to go away. So we now get a very basic form of that information. It would take a ton of work and money to make that information available in an accessible and bilingual way, which has not been a priority for the city thus far. We'll probably try to keep it a little bit more concise. Ben,
Yep.
what's next?
So another high-level question here is, how do you expect the east extension and the west extension, when that opens, to impact the current reliability of Line 1?
I can maybe answer that if that's okay. To impact the reliability of Line 1, the east extension in particular should not have any of those temporary speed restrictions that currently plague the rest of the line, because it is mostly straight. What's going to impact reliability is just how many trains we are using. The east extension requires only a couple more trains, but the west extension does require quite a lot more trains. And so all that matters by that point is figuring out what is wrong with our trains and how to fix our new bearing and our old bearing issue. The trains will have more kilometers put on them, but we will have more trains to spread across the line. So in theory, it should be a little bit of the same level of reliability. In terms of bus reliability after the fact, the east extension doesn't free up that many bus service hours. So it's hard to say that it will leave a meaningful impact. The west extension in particular will leave a pretty substantial impact on how we can move bus routes around and where we can take them off the parkway and off the highway and so on and so forth.
Does anyone have anything else to add, or should I move on here? Okay, perfect. So Jeff, this one is for you specifically, and it's, is the top problem the data to make good decisions, the willingness to make the tough decisions, or the funding to make the changes?
I think the data that we're getting from both Better Transit Ottawa and from Railfans is really important confirmation of the problems that we're experiencing with the system right now. And I think there is a disconnect between the communications that are coming out from city staff and what people know to be true. When you see the kind of delivery numbers that OC Transpo is telling you, and yet like every single day your bus is not coming, that creates a real disconnect between riders in the city that just increases mistrust and makes the entire discussion more challenging. I think, and I'm sorry, it might have been you, Kara, who spoke to decisions, or it might have been Ajay who spoke to decisions taken in like 2009, I think, to make, very big batch procurements. And then the decision in, I think it was 2019, to sell off the buses that we didn't think we were going to need because we had replaced those kilometers with rail kilometers instead. And now we are stuck waiting for buses that aren't arriving. There are reasons to believe that the decision to get rid of those buses was a risk worth taking with a good payoff had it paid off. But here we are today with not enough buses to deliver the service. It is a temporary situation. What I would suggest, and I know both Chair Gower and I have spoken to the press about the fact that the current crisis that we have is not one that we can solve by throwing money at it. I think the current crisis that we have is more systemic than that. Where I believe we need to think about greater investment in transit is once the system is stabilized. Maybe that's this summer. Eastern Extension is open, new electric buses have arrived, and things become a bit more regular. Then we have to think about how we are going to improve the service, to improve the comprehensiveness. It's not just the late buses that are a frustration to people. New Ways to Bus eliminated routes. It made your walk to your bus stop, instead of being a 200-meter walk in some cases, you might be walking 600 meters to your bus stop, several blocks over. We need to restore the comprehensiveness of the routes, and that's going to take financial resources, but financial resources are not going to help us get our trains running without slow orders and without the need to replace or those cartridge bearing assemblies, and financial resources are not going to bring in buses any sooner than the buses are going to arrive that we've already ordered. I'll leave it there.
And there's another question that's very closely related to what you were talking about, which is there, or what is the path to procuring more buses rapidly in order to alleviate the shortage? And it sounds like what you're saying is that at this point, there's not a way to do that faster than receiving the electric buses that we've already ordered.
No, I don't believe so. The buses simply are not there to purchase. If we could, we would. I know we have a fairly good batch of buses. I think it's 20 or so that we've been able to procure, and that's a procurement process that lasted months. Council and OC Transpo staff agreed months ago to start looking for new buses, and that is only starting to pay off now. If there is a bus that's available, we'll purchase it. I know know there are some members of the Transit Commission who are maybe a little hung up on whether or not council is prioritizing electric over other propulsion systems. And I think I've said publicly before, I don't think most of the commission cares if the buses run on coal. If we can get something on the streets today and start getting people moving again, that is going to be our priority. So, yeah, I don't see a faster procurement. The buses will start arriving over the course of the next several months, but they are arriving, a couple, at least a year into our bus current fleet aging more quickly than we had anticipated.
Our only option as of right now will be to procure used buses, and because we went with the large batch order, as opposed to other systems where they went with like an average, like they bought 10 buses this year and then 10 buses the next year kind of thing.
Yep.
The market for used buses, particularly transit buses, is just not very big. So if there are buses on the market, we will buy them. We bought those, the 40-foot Nova buses, but the market is just not there right now.
Yep. I think, in the next term council, that's something we have to look at is a procurement plan that sees regular acquisitions of buses that down the line would allow us to make decisions about selling those buses while they still have significant value. It's rather than these big batch acquisitions. Ben, let's move on.
Yep. And this is one more question about the rail fleet on line one. And what do you all see as a long-term solution? And in particular, should the procurement of new trains be something that we're thinking about now?
I mean, it's a hard question to answer because getting new trains, that would definitely be several years down the road before they would even be delivered, put into service. There's obviously specifications that would need to be customized to make it compatible with our system. But the reality is any train is heavily customized to the system it operates on. There's no off-the-shelf solution for that. But picking new trains, I don't think is really the solution. I think resolving these trains is the way that things have to proceed at this point. And I think Alstom, RTG, RTM, all the players that are involved in this need to get aligned and truly want to resolve the situation. It seems like there's a lot of legal infighting and who's to blame and a lot of finger pointing and coming back to the city and a lot of spinning around, dodging the blame where nothing really gets done and just time just keeps burning off. I was talking to some people on our online community recently about how, the mayor had made a big deal. I think it was a year or two ago. We're finally working on the root cause and we're finally working on the solution. Here in 3 years we'll have a proper working system. Well, 3 years is going to be in a couple months to a half a year. And the reality of the situation is a lot of that time has actually been doing a whole lot of nothing, where the players that needed to come to a resolution just kept fighting amongst each other who was responsible, and even decided that they were going to stop the work, then they restarted the work. So, it's ultimately frustrating that if they were to just develop a solution, obviously there's a big cost involved in that. These trains probably could run fine. I don't think there's something inherently wrong with the trains. I think the bogies and everything that was done was quite an ask of the manufacturers. The layout of the tracks, all sorts of aspects. And the trains were pretty much a custom offshoot of the original Citadis train. It's not really a metro train. It's a not to downplay it too much, it's more of a streetcar that we're operating here, right? So if they could just get their act together, come up with a solution, implement the solution, fund and just put the solution in place, install, retrofit the trains, I'm sure we wouldn't be having this discussion about trains right now. But, I'm optimistic it'll get resolved at some point. How long is that going to be? That's for them to decide.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you, Shane. And I see someone from Better Transit Ottawa has already asked to answer this question live, and they touched on it in their presentation. But is the ratio of buses that we need to retire the buses we currently have to the ones that we have procured good enough to improve service reliability when those new buses come in?
I mean, I think the thing with that is it's going to improve service reliability because service reliability right now is really bad. The question on um, is it going to be enough for us in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, because of how these orders work? If we make an order today, we get them in 2 or 3 years. My biggest worry with the current bus procurement is the fact that we've switched it all from partially being the longer articulated buses and partially being the shorter buses to now being all the shorter buses. So I worry we're going to have a capacity problem in a few years. Thankfully, there is now a order for another 50 articulated buses that should be coming in next year. But I think that to properly service Ottawa, I think we need a few more of those.
Because as it
Great.
stands, the 60-foot buses that we have right now, a lot of them are forced to be scrapped because they just make no financial sense to fix. Most of them are on their last legs. Some of them are 15, 16, 17 years old.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I just want to add one thing about the 60-foot buses. They board and like people getting on and off the buses is much, much faster on a 60-foot articulated bus with the 3 sets of doors than it is on a double-decker bus with the stairs, and then it is with a 40-foot bus. So not only is there higher capacity, it's also quicker to get people on and off at every stop.
Great, thank you. And Jeff, this is one for you. I'm sure it's a pretty quick question to answer, but can we get the Transit Commission to meet more often?
That's a good question. Probably. I'm going to take that away. I take that under advisement. The meetings, council's committee meetings are not necessarily town halls, right? They are opportunities for decisions to be made. They're all decision driven. The whole point of the meeting is to receive advice and recommendations from staff and to vote on those decisions. So the meeting schedule is dependent in large part on what kind of decisions we have to make. I will say though that what could be happening significantly more often are briefings and forums and opportunities to communicate what OC Transpo is doing outside of the legislative process. I know that I am disappointed that we are not hearing from particularly the mayor as often as we should. And the opportunities for people to tell us about their experiences are not happening as often as they should. Those are not necessarily commission meeting things that we should be doing, but there are other forums for that.
Great, thank you, Jeff. And I see someone would like to talk about the speed restrictions on line 1. So we have a question about those speed restrictions and whether there are any plans to remove those restrictions or whether that's possible, and just generally what the current situation is to do with those slowdowns that we're seeing on the line.
What I'm going to do is that's starting to get a little further away. Do we have more questions about sort of the data tools?
Yes,
because we
absolutely.
don't have OC Transpo staff with us this
Absolutely.
evening, and so I don't want to go too far down the path of getting into the technicalities of what is going on with the train today.
Great. So moving to specifically about the Block Explorer. So for anyone from Better Transit Ottawa, does the data specify if it should be a short, long, or double-decker bus? If yes, are they usually rolled out as they're supposed to be? And
Well, it doesn't. Sorry, I guess I'll answer this one. Well, we don't explicitly say what bus type it is. If you're familiar with the fleet, you can very easily find out what type of bus is on a run. Generally, anything in the 8,000s will be a double decker. Anything in the 6,000s is an articulated or 60-foot bus. Anything in the 4,000s or 2,000s is a 40-foot bus. As for whether or not they're rolled out correctly, definitely not. We're seeing stuff like double deckers on like the 6 and the 7 and the 12, which make way too frequent stops as Shane pointed out earlier, like the double deckers just board way too slowly for those kinds of routes. They'd be much better suited for routes like the 75, the 74, like any of like the Western Transitway routes that there's nice long distances between stops where the bus can get up to speed. You have mostly people getting on at one stop and off at one stop. Like you're not stopping every like 50 feet kind of thing. And point being, no, they're not using their bus fleet very efficiently.
As it stands now, we do not actually have the feature of like if a certain. I'm sure in OC Transpo's backend they have this block should be a 60-foot bus, this block should be a double decker kind of thing. That is not a feature that we have available because it's not a feature that's available in GTFS, or at least not without some crazy workaround like finding the bus number and referencing it to a particular thing. That's a feature we are exploring, but that's not something that we have that's available right now.
Of course, one of the data gaps that we have, sorry, just struck me as a really important data gap is passenger numbers. Right? Should a bus be a particular type of bus is dependent on how many people ride it. And that's that's not information that we can capture through publicly available sources.
No, and that kind of the block churning, like buses being pushed onto a different block, being pushed on a different block, that kind of large churn ends up with the kind of situation like you see like a double decker bus on like a local Canada route that maybe 20 people are riding, and then you see a 40-foot bus on like the 88 or the 7 or something. That kind of churn, because we don't have enough buses, is causing those kinds of things.
That's fascinating. Thanks.
Great. And another question about the Block Explorer. For Ajay, have you looked at the OC Transpo historic data, and do you notice the blocks getting bigger or shorter?
So unfortunately, right now, the data I'm working at is just for January. Looking at historical data past that is something we are looking into. OC Transpo doesn't provide historical data themselves, but there's this really great tool called Transc, which has been archiving historical data for so many agencies across US and Canada for a lot of time. And he's actually a really cool person, and he said he'll send us the data, so that's something we want to look into.
One major hiccup with that data, though, is that because it's based on GTFS, GTFS is a fairly modern specification. So we will not be able to go back until, like, you might be able to go back as far as like 2017, but you're not going to be able to see data going back to like the Transitway era.
And for schedules, there's two types of GTFS. There's GTFS for schedules, which OC Transpo has had for a decent amount of time. And then there's GTFS real time, which is using GTFS for also the GPS tracking. And that's a more recent implementation. I think maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, they finally published that. So to get before GTFS real time, the type of data you could get from OC Transpo was pretty limited. You just could get where a bus was while it's on a trip. Whereas with the new data, you could get where a bus is no matter what, even if it's not in a trip, even if it's sitting in the garage. So the types of data you can get at different time periods does vary, but I think we could at least get back, a year and a half of data to compare.
Great, thank you.
I'll just note it's 8 o'clock, so we got about 15, 20 minutes left for Q&A.
Great. So we still got some questions to go through here. I'm not sure if anybody on the call has knowledge of step back operations and how those work. Somebody had commented that block 2504 with a 14-minute gap, but still the bus started late. That's driver recovery time. We need step back operation. And I was wondering if anybody had any insight on that operational capacity and whether that's something that's able to be captured or that's out of our purview here today. I don't know what it is myself, so
Do they mean
Yeah.
like relief operations? Because I think that's the term that OC uses, where basically a bus like still is on the paddle, but different operators do different parts of the paddle. Because that is something OC does,
okay.
and it's pretty common throughout like paddles. But you can't really see them on the paddle because there's usually not a noticeable time gap. The only thing you can like breaks wise, the only thing you can really see on a paddle or block, sorry, we've been calling them, is if you see like a big 30-minute gap in the schedule or longer, that's usually the operator's break. But beyond that, you can't really tell from the data.
Okay, great, thank you. And this is one probably for Shane. And the question is about on those 18 trains that you're seeing on your tracker. Are you able to get data from OC Transpo about whether those trains are nearing that 100,000 kilometer marker, or is that something that we're only able to track what trains are there and what aren't there just based on what you're seeing from your crowdsourced data?
Yeah, pretty much we're limited by what we see with the crowdsourced data. The current limitation with the cartridge bearing assembly, they're limiting them to 100,000 kilometers before they need to be taken off the tracks and replaced. But there's also previously existing problems and mitigations that they have in place for the axles and the wheel bearings and well, I mean some other stuff, right? Remember there's a situation where they're trying to pin the nuts, and I can't remember off the top of my head how many kilometers that is, but that's definitely much less than 100,000 kilometers. And what we've heard from some sources is that there's actually some trains of those 18 that are starting to approach that threshold. So that would actually kick in prior to the 100,000. So again, like what I was talking about earlier, my concern with 18 trains right now, there's the 100,000 limitation, there's the nut pinning that needs to happen, there's other work that could need to be done on these trains. The train could break down. We could lose 18 trains and go down to maybe 15, 16 all of a sudden, right? So 18 trains is definitely a high risk situation right now. Hopefully more trains get restored back into service before some need to be taken off. But that's something that we're tracking, as I mentioned earlier. It's the same 18 trains for almost 2 weeks now. We haven't seen any new trains come in, and we haven't seen any trains be taken off. So they've been lucky so far, but that luck will only go so far and last so long if trains don't come back into service.
Thanks, Shane. And this is a question about data across OC Transpo and Better Transit Ottawa, and it speaks to the discrepancy that is seen between your site and the data that OC Transpo is posting. And so for the folks at Better Transit Ottawa, what in your view is explaining the discrepancy that people might see between the data on your website and what OC Transpo is showing? And do you believe that there is a significant discrepancy?
So I
I
don't think it's
believe
necessary. Oh,
I believe that there definitely is a discrepancy, but it very much comes down to the data is often based on like how late a bus is, when a bus is considered extremely late, that kind of thing. It depends on how you count a bus as late or extremely late. Like if a bus was 4 minutes late and you count a late bus as 5 minutes, well, that bus was still late, but it wasn't considered late, kind of thing. Those are the kinds of things that would happen in, as they spoke to before, an environment where the city's trying to play their cards tight, make themselves look good, kind of thing. That is, I believe, a good thing about doing this from a third party is that we don't have to mince words, and we can provide actual hard data as opposed to kind of massaged data like that. I'll hand it over to Ajay for now.
yeah, I'll say also a lot of the OC Transpo data is focused on averages that also include times like overnight where there's no traffic. And so that's why we're focused on, for example, on the cancellation page, you could sort by just the peak hours, and then you could see that 40% of trips are canceled. But then if you average it over the whole time, you get closer to a 95% rate, like the OC Transpo site says.
So it's not necessarily that anyone's using different data. It's just the way that data is expressed.
Exactly.
Awesome. Thank you. And Jeff, this one's kind of for you. It's straying away from the data tools. If you want to go there, or would you like to stick on those for right now?
If you've got some more data questions, let's pose those while we've got the architects here.
Okay.
But we've got time for a little bit more questioning, so
Perfect.
let's move on, and then I'll come back to it.
And this is a comment, but I think there's a question in there with the data, and I think it might be kind of a suggestion or idea for Better Transit Ottawa, which is with the data that you're collecting. I think we need a good narrative for key routes for the 12 and 11 with the key ideas to fix. So adjust blocks, add congestion times, or express how you think that a trip might be improved. Is that something that you're looking to do through your platform?
That would mostly happen. We advocate for a lot outside of the particular data acquisition, we advocate for smaller, lower budget, but quicker time to execution transit projects, like bus lanes on Bank Street, bus lanes on bus lanes on lots of different streets, because bus lanes are cheap and easy to implement. Having those kinds of things would definitely improve. It will make the bus faster, which means the bus could turn around faster, which means you can get more use out of your bus. I feel like going for if we give OC Transpo suggestions, we're a volunteer organization. We only have so much time. That kind of whole system encompassing, like how can we make specific routes better, that is something that it's incredibly time consuming. It would be very difficult for us as a volunteer organization to do.
And something that OC Transpo does do is that for the 11 in particular, it was from a couple transit commissions ago. They have actually done like a full length report on not particularly adjusting blocks, but like physical infrastructure they can build for super cheap for the Route 11. So we got it through a Freedom of Info request, obviously, but they had the data showing what part of the route is the most delay, what's the most variable delay, what's the slowest part, and they had a list of fixes like signal priority or what are called bus bulbs, which is when you bring the bus platform out closer into the street so the bus doesn't have to turn off the street. And so when they are pushed to, because I know 11 was an example, and I think I can't remember whose ward the 82 is in, but the counselor for that ward pushed really hard because that's really the only route in their ward. So they pushed really hard at OC Transpo and said, "Hey, this route's really bad. Can we look at what we can do to fix it?" And so what OC Transpo did was they did a report and looked into what they can do to fix Route 82 in terms of like infrastructure and what about it was wrong. So I think what would be good for is maybe if OC Transpo did something like their top 10 worst routes or top 10 busiest routes, they would do a report each year onto what they can do to fix it. I think that'd be fantastic if they can continue what they're already doing.
Great, thank you. And another question here is about comparing Ottawa to other cities. So is that something that you're doing? Are there tools that you know of that can accurately compare our reliability data here in Ottawa with other cities? And is our problem uniquely bad, or are we just not as aware of how other transit agencies are suffering similar issues? And if there are some tools out there that people can use to compare, please shout them out.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any specific tools to compare, but that's definitely something I want to do, at least on like the bus availability portion, to be able to get some bus availability graphs in different cities to see, you know, how normal is our system. But what you can tell is if you just um like today, if you open at rush hour the transit app, any frequent route, you'll see 3, 4 cancellations. You don't see that in any other city. So that's one anecdotal way you could check. But that is something we
Okay.
want to look into.
Great, thank you. And we're getting to the end of the data tool specific questions here. I'm just looking to see if there's anything else. And this is just more of a OC Transpo question. So yeah, that's pretty much all our questions on the data tools themselves. Jeff, are you able to take a high-level question about transit and housing?
Absolutely.
Okay, so transit and housing are big issues for post-secondary students. Those who can't afford to live near campus often have to live further out, but often rely on and deal with unreliable transit. How does the city address this intersection of transit and housing insecurity, although they fall under different committees and different dockets?
That's a really big question.
It is.
Housing supply right across the city is critical. We've just passed a new comprehensive zoning bylaw that will allow much denser housing in every part of the city, and it focuses in new density on transit. So it is very explicit in our official plan that where we allow the most density is going to be in the places that are in closest proximity to our higher order transit. So that could be rail, could be bus rapid transit. And then the zoning will permit that, and you will see the density come, but that density is only going to be successful if we get the transit right. Now, the way planning is done in Ontario is that it all comes one from the other. So we have a provincial policy statement that says you're going to grow through intensification, and you're going to intensify to the greatest amount in your transit. And that is good news for students. Being able to live close to transit is a critical affordability question. We have a zoning then that allows that. We also have a transportation master plan that has a transit master plan that speaks to the capital projects that need to be invested in order to achieve the kind of growth that we anticipate. In order to make intensification near transit successful, there are transit projects that we need to build. And the ones that come to easiest mind are the bus rapid transits that are planned for Baseline and eventually for Carling. Those projects then start collecting development charges from the new development, and in theory should be built in close to lockstep with the intensification coming. So the overall planning process treats it as a single whole. Where I think things fall down is on the operational side, in the political decisions that are made that are year by year, where every year we have a determination to make about how many taxes we want to collect in order to pay for what level of service on the operational side. And I would suggest that for many years, we have not been making the operational investments in OC Transpo that we need to, that are independent of growth, that are independent of land use planning considerations. That's where the work needs to be done. But if you were to ask me, is our transit infrastructure planned according to how our official plan intends for us to grow? I would say that is very explicitly done. But in the political decisions on a day-to-day basis, a budget cycle by budget cycle basis, things can fall apart.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. I know that was a big question. I think that was a very comprehensive answer. We did have one more data question come in kind of just under the wire. Ajay, if you don't mind taking it. So does the GTFS data differentiate or capture when a bus passes by a stop without stopping to pick up passengers or let off passengers?
Yeah, that's a very good point. It does not. And
Okay.
I've experienced this just a few days ago. There was a canceled bus, and then my bus I was supposed to get passed right by me, and then the next bus was also canceled. So yeah, that is unfortunately a limitation in our data for sure.
Great. Thank you. And I know there's some questions here that we haven't answered because they may be better directed at city staff. Please, if you would like your question to be answered, write to our office, jeff.leeper@ottawa.ca, and we will do our best to capture that answer from a city staff if that's available. And I'll let Jeff close us off.
I'm actually, Ben, I'm going to ask you to make Chair Gower a panelist for a moment. I know that he's been listening in all evening, and I think he wants he'd welcome an opportunity to say thanks for what he's heard this evening.
Okay, that he should be rejoining us momentarily.
I love the icon, Glenn.
I I am here. Let me just figure out how to get my camera on. You can hear me okay, I assume?
We can hear you.
Okay, super. Stand by here. I don't know. There we go. You can see me now. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Jeff, and your team for putting this together. And thank you to Better Transit and Rail fans for walking us through your tools. I think this is super, like just excellent. I'm a transit nerd and I'm a data nerd. This takes me back like 25 years ago. A friend and I, we set up a website called Ottawa Gas Prices, where we were crowdsourcing gas prices from around the city. And like this is the same spirit. So I love this. Um, I made some notes here as we were going on. This tool is actually I've been using it in my office. We've been using it the last couple weeks since Jeff showed me to diagnose things for residents. We used to send them off to OC Transpo, and like 2 or 3 days later we'd get an answer. But like a resident will email my office and say, "Why was my bus canceled?" or "Was my bus canceled?" So we can figure that out. We've diagnosed a chronic issue with the 261 in the morning. It's based on a 62 that takes way too long to get from Tunney's to Stittsville. Um, so just as a self-serve tool for counselors, it's very, very helpful. And Jeff, I want to encourage you to share this recording with all of our colleagues. Um, it's actually answers like Wilson Lowe, one of our transit committee members. Um, he's been asking OC Transpo staff for access to reliability stats broken down by on-peak and off-peak. And this is exactly what he's looking for. I also thought it was interesting playing with one of the sliders, the sensitivity. If you set the lateness at 5 minutes versus 6 minutes versus 7 minutes, what difference that makes in the percentage, that's kind of interesting too. So I think there's like a ton of insight that we can pull from this, from a nerd out deep dive point of view, but also just from a practicality point of view as counselors. So thank you for this. And I'm going to have one other thing. Two suggestions. Shane, that you add the names of the trains along with the numbers, right? Like the Magic Moose or whatever. Um, because I often remember the train names I'm on before I remember the numbers, but that's just me. And the other is, I think we should seriously figure out if there's a way for OC Transpo to license this app or endorse it in some way, because it's really like transit in a way, the transit app, right? That's a third party that's taken open data and translated it into something really useful for riders. I have a hard time seeing OC Transpo building an app like this without it being a multi-year, multi-million dollar project. You guys have already done it, so I'm gonna chat with OC staff and see if there's a way that if you're open to it, see if there's a way to collaborate on it, because I think it's a really, really helpful tool for a whole bunch of reasons. So thank you for walking us through it. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for that, Glenn. And Shane, Ajay, Yukara, Alex, Griffin, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. You've pushed the level of transparency around transit performance to a whole new level. And I think the residents of Ottawa have taken note, and certainly the politicians have taken note. And I don't know that anyone from OC Transpo is here. I'm sure somebody is. And I'm sure that they are taking note. It is amazing. I am also a big fan of crowdsourcing. I like to count things. I'm a big fan of asking people to help me count things. And Glenn is absolutely right. There is a point at which you can ask people to help you count things, like how many cyclists go by the corner of Laurier and Bay, where people are more than happy to volunteer their time. But there comes a level of sophistication and effort where you really truly need to partner with the government institution that is doing it, and by partner I mean receive financial help from. So I'm interested in having that discussion along with you, Glenn. Thank you for raising it. Folks, if you do have any other questions, email me, jeff.leeper@ottawa.ca. And I will just say thanks to our panelists for participating this evening. Glenn, thanks for a couple of wrap-up words. Ben, thanks for making sure that this ran smoothly. And have a good night, everyone. Bye.